Welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast, the first one in the year 2025. We're your co-hosts. I'm Jackson Caudell. That is RJ Schafer coming to you Wednesday, January 8th. It's our first podcast since the Birmingham Bowl loss to Vanderbilt. We took a little time off. We had the holidays. Happy New Year to everybody out there. I know it's a little late, but still Happy New Year from us to you. RJ, how's War Weekend? How's 2025 treating you?
Hey, it is great. I can't complain. We had a little bit of time off. Now we get to talk some Georgia Tech basketball, some Georgia Tech football, transfer guys coming in. There were some nice transfer portal additions that, almost felt like a Christmas present.
Pistons are winning, Packers in the playoffs. Like that's everything's coming up for you in 2025. But just a new year, but same stuff applies to everything. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully have another great year. We love 2024, loved all the support we got, and hopefully we can continue to build this, just build it up for the Georgia Tech community and the Georgia Tech fans, because that's what it's all about. We appreciate all the support. So if you are watching this on YouTube, we would appreciate the subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, liking the video, hitting that notification bell so you know whenever our new content goes live, following us wherever you get your podcasts and all that good stuff. Again, I know I repeat it every episode, but it's just, kind of housekeeping stuff for us. But so, we're going to talk transfer portal today. I know not a ton has happened since we last talked to you, but there were some things even before the bowl game we weren't able to really dig into. A couple commitments that we want to talk about today. Obviously, there was a few commitments over the weekend, and still might be some, although the first portal window is kind of slowing down. So like most of the portal window officially closed the 28th, but if you're still playing in a bowl game after the 28th, after your bowl game wins, you've got 5 days to enter the portal and transfer. So like obviously a lot of schools are starting up their spring semester, so like the win, like it's very compacted now, and then graduate transfers can enter at any time. So you still have some guys entering, like we still got the college football playoff going on, so players from Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, or Texas can still get in the portal after their games are done. But again, with that, it's just such a weird window because, like, again, school's about to start back up, by the time the playoff gets done. And those games are tomorrow and Friday, I believe. So I know it can confuse people. Like, the transfer portal officially closed, but still got kids entering the portal even long after. So just if anybody needed some clarification on that, just to provide it. So we got some portal updates there. Got some basketball stuff to talk about. I know most people they want to forget that last night ever happened and they never have to hear or watch any of it ever again. We are going to talk about the loss to Syracuse. After, again, they won some games against some lower ACC competition, but they did have a slight win streak going. But the big basketball story, of course, we're going to talk women's basketball as well. They are off to the best start in program history. Face Virginia Tech tomorrow night. I like them to win that game, but we'll talk a little bit more after that. So let's talk transfer portal. So some guys we haven't talked about since the bowl game, and I know a couple of kids we're going to talk about committed before the bowl game, but it was after we did podcast episodes. So we'll start with running back Malachi Hosley from Penn. He was a guy we kind of identified early on. He was a name you started hearing about pretty much as soon as the portal opened there, early December. And look, I can talk to we can rehash all of our conversations about the running back depth from this past year. And we talked about it extensively. Go all the way back to the spring. We said, okay, you've got a stud in Jamal Haynes, but okay, who's going to step up and be the Dante Smith of this group? You know what I'm saying? It's who was going to step up, be that 500, 600-yard guy who could pop off explosive plays and just be a really reliable guy. And not that these guys aren't talented and didn't flash during the year, but you never got a consistent feel. And some of that was due to injury and some of that was just due to youth. Like a lot of these guys are young. So you had Chad Alexander who flashed a good bit at times last year. Trelane Maddox, who did some good things against VMI, was a little bit banged up last year. Anthony Carey, the freshman, and you still got some veteran guys on there as well. But Hosley is more of a proven product, at least at the FCS level. So he ran for over 1,000 yards last year at Penn, had 191 carries for 1,192 yards, 9 touchdowns, averaged 6.2 yards a carry. He played for a couple of years, a couple years ago, had 121 carries for 723 yards, 7 touchdowns, also averaged 6 yards a carry. So you're bringing him in as kind of a veteran presence. I'm not even saying he's definitely going to earn the number 2 role because it's, again, one of those things we'll see play out through the spring. I think that's signing a guy like this is what you're hopeful for. Like, he was one of the top 15 backs in the transfer portal. Like, he was a guy that other schools really wanted as well. And a couple guys I didn't mention earlier that are going to join the fray this year, the freshman backs, J.P. Powell and Shane Marshall. So running back will be an interesting position. But when we kind of did our roster preview before the portal officially opened, we talked about, hey, if you could get one experienced guy, explosive guy as well at running back, like you would do, you're probably not going to add multiple guys to the position, and that's what they've done. I really like the addition of Hosley. We'll see how it plays out because, again, transfers can be hit or miss. Like, you're not going to bat 1,000 on this. So we'll see what happens. But I really like the addition and think he could be a really good player next season.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of, taking a chance on FCS players. But to me, I don't even view it as that big of a chance. He hasn't played against an FBS team. He has played against a future FBS team in Delaware. They will be moving to Conference USA. He had 176 yards in that game. I think he's really explosive. He has, a decent amount of size. He kind of is similar to Jamal Haynes. He has a couple of years of eligibility. I just think it was honestly one of the best transfer portal additions. He's not the biggest name. He doesn't have, insane levels of popularity like we've seen with a ton of running backs. Obviously, this running back draft class is loaded. But I think Hosley, if you, develop him right, I think he can be, one of the top backs in the last few years for Georgia Tech. I think he has really high potential. So, I see a lot of things I like in him. It's all going to happen when he's on campus.
Yep, exactly. So he'll be one guy we're paying really close attention to, and it's not like Georgia Tech just uses like two backs. Like, I think you would like to have just a really reliable number two, but like I'm excited to see what the other guys bring, in their second year, like Alexander, Maddox, and Anthony Carey. And then, hey, maybe J.P. Powell and Shane Marshall can come in as freshmen and contribute. I'm not maybe anticipating it, but we'll see. Never say never. One of the other additions, sticking in the state of Georgia, was Mercer defensive end Braden Manley. He was a very, very productive pass rusher last season. 38 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 10 quarterback hits, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 pass deflections, a forced fumble. Also had 9.5 sacks, which is, of course, the stat that most people are going to care about. Southern Conference Defensive Player of the Year. And I'll say for people that don't know, like, Mercer had a very good defense at the FCS level this past season, and he was one of the main contributors of that. We've talked about Georgia Tech needing to upgrade their pass rush in the portal this offseason. Kind of what do you think they got in Manley, and can he be an instant impact guy right away?
Yeah, I think he really can, and honestly, I think he could be a guy that starts. He has a level of experience, was a sophomore at Mercer, and in a group that, again, FCS level doesn't play a ton of FBS talent. He was extremely competitive. Obviously, SoCon Defensive Player of the Year, was a Buchanan Award finalist. I think he does have a ton of potential. He's very similar to Malachi Hosley. I view them very similarly. They are both extremely good at the FCS level. I think he's really explosive. My only question mark is the size a little bit. I don't know. 6'2" can be good. I think there is a lot of untapped potential there. Another guy that I did like a lot, same thing with Hosley. I think he could be a day one starter.
Yeah, and we talked about the guys that Georgia Tech is losing on the defensive line. Now, pass rush was kind of a sore spot last year. It was just never could come together. But you're also losing a lot of guys like Romello Height hit the portal, went to Texas Tech. Kevin Harris is gone. Sylvain Yonduin's gone. Like you're losing some bodies there. And yeah, you have some young guys that I really like in Montre Bradford and Jordan Boyd. But you're getting a guy who, again, very proven at the FCS level. And I say this, I don't care if you're an FCS All-American who put up a gazillion yards in a year. Like, I'm always going to have concerns about the step up. Maybe not concerns, but I'm just going to have question marks about the step up. And going from the FCS level up to the ACC, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And we'll see how, if he hits the ground running. And just as an instant impact guy, I really like the potential here. Again, he produced a lot. One of the better defenses at the FCS level. I really liked him when I turned the tape on. So we'll see. Georgia Tech needed to get guys in the transfer portal to help with their pass rush. And I as far as guys in there. I really like him, and I know they're still in the hunt for some as well. Like I don't know that they're quite done um, adding at that position. But another guy we want to talk about is Clemson defensive end AJ Hoffler. He committed over the weekend. I think Saturday, I believe, if I'm correct. Now he is more like he was a 4-star recruit a couple of years ago. Didn't really produce a lot at Clemson. To be honest, he does have some low PFF grades, but I do think it's worth taking the swing on a guy like that in the portal. Has good size, nice athletic ability. What did you make of this addition?
Yeah, I looked at it in the same way. I think a lot of teams were looking at him because he had looks from Auburn, who, as we know very well, has done very well in the portal. He's more of a developmental guy. He was kind of stuck in a room that had a lot of talent, and he just fell behind a little bit. Didn't get a ton of playing time. In the playing time that he did have, uh, honestly, was outmatched. Like there were just some plays that weren't amazing. But I think when you have a guy like him, who was a 4-star recruit, obviously at a big program like Clemson, I think you are willing to take a chance on that. And I think he is a guy, again, you lose so many guys on the defensive line next year. There's so many holes that you need to replace. And I think he can be a guy. I don't know if he'll be a day one starter, but I think he'll be a guy that can come in and learn under some of the transfers that have came in, and find his role later.
Yeah, and defensive line is maybe the number one position other than quarterback. Like you just cannot have enough depth at.
Yeah.
Like just having guys that are able to play like 8, 9 guys. Like it's you don't want to just have a front four and then like that be it. Like even if your front four is great, like you want to have some guys that can rotate in. And I think at minimum he can be that. Again, some of the numbers I've seen people talk about like they're not great. Like 15 tackles. Past 2 seasons at PFF this past year played 256 snaps, finished with a 56.5 grade. 2023 played 74 snaps, finished with a 55.9 grade. He was 6'4", 240. And like I said, out of high school, he was number 222 prospect in the country, number 25 edge, number 22 player in the state of Georgia. Again, I think you just need bodies on the defensive line. I like taking the chance here. And we've both talked about how much we think Jess Simpson is a really good defensive line coach. Like I want to see both of the guys we've talked about, both Hoffler and Manley, have intriguing tools. And I'm excited to see them, put them to use. Any other thoughts on the portal? Anything else? I think the portal's winding down. I still think there's potential to add to the defensive line a little bit, but I think you're starting to see the transfer class kind of take shape. There have been some exits as well. You've seen some young guys, especially on the offensive line. I know Kai Greer went to Stanford. You've had some other guys enter the portal as well. Just kind of what are your thoughts overall on the transfer portal haul and, any of the guys that have left as well?
Yeah, I think again, they're not like one of the highest ranked teams, and we talked about how transfer portal rankings are not always accurate. Similar to last year, like when you look at last year's class, I think Brent Pry has built a great foundation. You don't need to get the biggest name prospect out of Brent Key. Yeah,
ACC Brent's confused, man.
ACC Brent's with a Y in the end.
Watching too much of the Duke's Mayo Bowl last week.
Yeah, I think Brent Key has built a solid foundation in the transfer portal, and I think again we're going to see the same thing as we saw last year. A lot of guys that were really big question marks, like especially at tight end. A lot of guys that were question marks heading into the year, and they played great. And I think that's going to be the same thing we see this year. I like the mix of guys. I like the amount of depth that we have added in the transfer portal. There's just not really much to dislike about the class unless you're somebody that abides by transfer portal class rankings.
Yeah, we're not. We've always been rebels in that regard. One more. The last guy we're going to talk about, Marshall Nichols, the UNLV punter. Look, we kind of had that as an underrated potential, position that Georgia Tech needed to get because David Shanahan had been the punter for a long time. He is gone now. You needed to fill that void, and preferably with an experienced guy. Marshall Nichols has been very good for UNLV the past 3 seasons. I mean, he was one of the top punters in the country in 2023. He didn't have a dramatic drop-off. He wasn't quite as good this past season as he was in 2023. But again, 3-year starter for the Rebels. He was 6th nationally last year, averaging 47.1 yards per punt. 2022, his very first year, was 42.4. This past season, it was 44.3. So he's gotten better since his freshman year. Had a really, really good 2023 season. From the Atlanta area as well. Played high school in the state of Georgia. And again, just brings the experience. I really like that addition. Any big thoughts on the new punter?
Yeah, I will say if people remember UNLV's fake punt, I believe it was last week of the season, that was him. He had that jump pass. Maybe there could be some fake punts in the future.
I hadn't seen that a
I,
whole lot, but
I think there is. I think there's some upside with that. But he really is. Not that this term is used a lot. He's a two-way punter.
yeah, like two-way punter. I like that phrasing. But um, any other thoughts on the transfer portal?
Nope.
Yep, just keep your eye out. Like again, everything's kind of winding down. We're gonna be all eyes forward towards spring ball here in just a little bit, but I think they've hit the positions well. Look, the only position we told you at the beginning of this whole thing that they probably almost certainly, unless something shocking happened, we're not going to add to was quarterback. Haven't added a quarterback. Gotten a running back in Malachi Hosley. You've added some receivers with Eric Rivers, Dean Patterson, Day'Bron Gatling. Like that was good. You've added JT Byrne and at the tight end position. He's going to kind of fill that block role. They needed some players at the tight end position, and I think they've done that. You've added some young guys on the offensive line, like Andrew Rosinski. I'm a pretty big fan of. As far as time goes, like I really liked him coming out of high school. We said the defensive line was a big area of need. They've added guys there. I don't know that they're done yet. Added some linebackers as well. Kamen Spalding from Tennessee Tech, Melvin Jordan from Oregon State, both a couple guys I like. And then the guys in the secondary. Yeah, Daquan White from Eastern Michigan, Kelvin Hill from UAB. Both guys I'm pretty high on, or at least, I was when I watched them and coming into. So you've attacked pretty much every position that you needed to. And, you've gotten key guys back. Again, they did have some losses in the portal. Like we talked to Eric Singleton, Romello Height. But I think it's been a pretty solid portal class overall. And I'm excited to see what it can put on the field in 2025. I know it seems a little early to be talking about that, but I don't know that it's ever too early at this stage. 7 months until they face Colorado, a little more than 7 months. So we'll keep you up to date on anything. We'll talk about it, whenever we get together. I don't know that a ton more is going to happen, but there's some stuff out there that could. But that kind of wraps up as far as transfer portal goes for me. Let's get into the big. Man, women's basketball is off to a fantastic start this year. Like this team is an absolute joy to watch. And I will look, I know we do a Georgia Tech podcast, and it may sound like, I'm talking more in their favor. I don't know how they are not ranked in the top 10. Like I don't know what more this team can do to be ranked higher than they are. Like I don't know, to be honest, I don't know where exactly I would rank them, but they're 15-0 and they've gotten some really good wins. They beat Oregon, beat Mississippi State. They went on the road and they crushed North Carolina. Like that score might look a little close, right? The final score, that game was not competitive for 3 quarters. And North Carolina's a pretty good team. They've won 13 of their 15 games by double digits. Danny Carnegie every week gets ACC Rookie of the Week. She's been fantastic this season. They crushed Syracuse last week. They've had some time off. They face Virginia Tech tomorrow. Virginia Tech's a solid team. Like, whenever I see the ESPN bracketology, and that's kind of what I refer to as far as, brackets goes. Like, I'm not a bracket expert. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I am. They've had Georgia Tech as a number 4 seed, and they've had Virginia Tech on that bubble line. Like, it's kind of, I think they were among the first 4 out when I last looked at it yesterday. So this could be a test. Again, it's at McCamish Pavilion, 7:00 tomorrow. If you're able to be there, definitely try to be there. But I can just tell you, this team's been a ton of fun to watch. They shoot well, they defend well. Like, I think they're a really complete team, and I like them to win tomorrow.
Yeah, I think this team is exactly what we saw flashes of last year. Like, obviously against Pitt, that was probably the best offensive game I have seen from a Georgia Tech team ever. Like, that was complete dominance of an ACC opponent who was looked at to be in the top half of the conference. You have 2 ranked wins. You beat Nebraska. You beat North Carolina. Like you said, I just don't know what else they could do besides schedule a harder out-of-conference schedule to be top 10 in the country. I mean, you're 13th after being undefeated in January. in one of the toughest conferences, in a conference that has Notre Dame, a conference that has Duke, NC State, FSU, Cal, Louisville, plenty of ranked teams, and you played plenty of quality conference opponents. I just think they have an argument to be one of the top teams in the country, and the fact that they stayed at 13 2 weeks in a row after picking up a ranked win, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's again, and look, and at least in college basketball, rankings are rankings. We'll see how it plays out, and they have a big opportunity here shortly. So they have Virginia Tech at home tomorrow. Sunday they go to Louisville. Next Thursday is like the big test. Like that's the road trip to Notre Dame. For anybody that does not know, Notre Dame is number 3 in the country right now and is a very, very good overall team. Like I know they have a couple losses, I believe, but like they are a very good team. Like you're number 3 for a reason. They're 12-2, and their only losses, they lost by 11 to Utah and by 8 to TCU. TCU was ranked at the time. I believe they're still ranked now, but I know they were definitely ranked at the time. They also have a 13-point win over USC, and they've also beaten UConn and North Carolina. Notre Dame's a very good team, and so we'll see that next week. But again, taking care of business, like Virginia Tech and Louisville are like solid potential tournament teams. Like it's not like Georgia Tech can take them out. I don't think they will, but there is a chance they're 17-0 heading into that matchup on the road against Notre Dame. I'll be very dialed into that. I'm very excited to see that. And some more, the rest of January, they host Clemson at Virginia, host Duke, who is also ranked. ACC is a pretty good women's basketball conference. Obviously, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech at the top, but you've got North Carolina, Duke, Cal, I believe NC State and Florida State are also pretty good as well. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I like them to be 17-0 heading into that game against Notre Dame. But all right, last night a basketball game was played in Syracuse.
Yep.
That the first half of this game, look, it got a little better with like 10 minutes to go. As far as I don't like doing this much because I have my dream job. I have a wonderful job, and I don't like to complain about it much. Last night was rough. Like watching and covering that game last night was tough. So Georgia Tech had won 3 in a row. Look, I know it was Alabama A&M, Notre Dame, and Boston College. Notre Dame is pretty solid. I'll say Boston College is bad. Syracuse, this is probably the worst Syracuse team I've seen in a while. I hope I'm not like going too far out of my lane there, but this is a pretty bad team. Excuse me. Georgia Tech was actually favored going into last night. It was just by 1.5, but like they were favored on the road at Syracuse, which kind of showed you the state Syracuse had been in, and Syracuse kind of controlled it the whole way. I mean, they won by 7. The shooting on both sides was really poor. I mean, Georgia Tech finished 36% from the field and 19% from 3, 4 of 21. And look, I know I don't expect it to be NBA levels of 3-point capability, but like 19% is very bad. Notre Dame or Syracuse was not a ton better. I mean, they shot 41% from the field. They were only 20% from 3. You had a nice game from Lance Terry, who, again, that's just kind of what I expect from him. He had 18 points. Nate George had 13 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Kind of a tough night for Brian Dongo. Just everybody's shooting as a whole on Georgia Tech. It was just overall, it just wasn't very good. Javian McCollum had a very tough night. I mean, 6 points. He finished with 6. Yeah, 6 points on 3 of 13 shooting. Jaden Mustaf he was solid again. He's a freshman. He's going to have some up and downs. Played 23 minutes, 8 points, 6 rebounds. He did some things well, I thought, but overall, this was kind of like Duncan Powell during this little stretch of wins. He'd been coming off the bench and playing pretty well. Wasn't the case last night. Look, we haven't had a lot of time to talk about the men's basketball team. Neither one of us thought that they were going to be like an actual tournament team. We said they would be. I thought they would be better and be on the bubble. I think they've kind of fallen short of that. Like there's no way they're going to be on the bubble at all this year. Now, I'll say this, just because the ACC as a whole is pretty bad, and I try to stick up for the ACC a little bit because I think they get overlooked in a lot of aspects when it comes to athletics. But man, it's just been really tough as far as basketball goes this year. Like we kind of talked about it at the beginning of the year. We thought it would be Duke, North Carolina, and then kind of a gap. It's Duke and then like the Grand Canyon. So I don't know if people watched last night. Pitt was thought to be like top 4 team in the ACC. Like, and they're a good team. This is not me bashing Pitt at all. Like Duke beat them by nearly 30. Like again, we're mainly talking about Georgia Tech here, but just kind of showing you the state of the ACC. Like it's Duke and then everybody else, which is why my main point being that I can still see Georgia Tech getting some wins. I know losing on the road to Syracuse in that fashion, but I don't think it's like Georgia Tech's not going to win another game this year. They face SMU this Saturday. SMU's 11-4, 2-2 in the ACC. They lost to North Carolina last night. Like I said, there's just a pretty big gap in terms of just talent. Like Duke is the only team ranked in the AP top 25 right now. I haven't checked the latest Ken Palm rankings to see where he's got the ACC at, but I'll say just as a whole, it would not shock me if Georgia Tech pulls some wins and has a similar record as to what they did last year. But I do think it's just disappointing to watch right now, just because I know they weren't great last year, but to me, when I watch them, they feel worse. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I think last night was one of the biggest. I don't even want to call it an off game. It was bad all around. Like, not just for Georgia Tech. Like, I don't think Syracuse played that game very strong earlier. And in the middle of the game, I asked myself the question, was it good defense or was it bad offense? And I was trying as hard as I could to make myself think that it was good defense. And at some points, I thought the defense was strong. But, I mean, there was no way that you were going to shoot the ball at that clip. That was probably the most air balls I've seen in a Power 6 men's college basketball game ever. Probably, I think there were 6 maybe in the first half, probably more, unless I missed some. But it was ugly all around. There was some very selfish ball at times. For some points there, it seems like Georgia Tech couldn't score, and when they could score, it was a Lance Terry step back 3. Any of the set plays, didn't really work out well. The pick and roll wasn't, working as well as you thought it was. It was an off night for Bayandongo. There were just a lot of things that didn't go well. And I don't think Syracuse honestly played that game great either. That was the lowest attendance for a Syracuse game in a very, very, very long time. I just think the state of the ACC it's fallen off.
Yeah. And that might be a podcast we do at some point because, it is, football off season. Basketball content is going to dominate kind of going forward right now. And that might be something we can get into. But, yeah, just looking at Ken Palm here, like Duke actually took over the number 1 overall spot from Auburn, which Duke is a very, very good team. I know if anybody hasn't watched them just outside of the Georgia Tech game, they're very good. Then Pitt is actually second in the ACC. They're number 25. And like I said, like Duke beat them by 29 last night. It's just kind of – my point is just showing the gap just between Duke and the rest. It's just the ACC is just very muddled. You've got North Carolina at 30. They have talent. I kind of question their coaching a little bit, but that's discussion for another time. Clemson at 34, Louisville 37, and then there's another big drop-off to SMU, who, again, Georgia Tech plays on Saturday on the road. They're number 55. Then another gap, Florida State 68, Wake Forest 83, Notre Dame 91, who Georgia Tech did beat, NC State 90. And then there's just a bunch of ACC teams bunched up here. NC State 92, Stanford 98, Georgia Tech 102. Georgia Tech only dropped 1 spot last night, like they're 101. Virginia 106, Miami 113, Syracuse is 125. So again, that just not a great loss. Cal 135, and then there's another drop off to Virginia Tech at 160. Boston College is ranked last at 188. So it just shows you like there's just a lot of ACC teams down around the 80 to 100 range and kind of beyond there. So I can still see them gathering some wins, but they do face kind of a tough slate here coming up. To be honest, like SMU is going to be a very tough game. Clemson at home, Florida State on the road. Then you get Louisville and Clemson again a little bit later. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I definitely echo people's concerns that product is not great right now. It doesn't seem like Stoudemire is doing a great job as far as development goes this year. He's still recruiting well, but we'll see how it plays out. Like I feel like I do think basketball, you need to give it the whole season to breathe, as frustrating as that can be, and just kind of see where they are at the end of the season. We'll kind of discuss it from there, but we'll take it game by game. Any other big thoughts on basketball?
Not really.
I mean,
Not
honestly,
much I want to remember about it.
that segment went a little longer than we planned, but that's gonna do it for today's show. Did a little transfer portal talk, definitely some basketball talk we wanted to get in there. Baseball's coming up. We're going to get into that a little bit more. We're going to be previewing the baseball season. We're not that far off from that, so definitely stay locked in right here. But again, I appreciate anybody tuning in. I hope you've had a great start to 2025 and a great new year. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, like button, follow us wherever you get your podcast. We really appreciate it, guys. We had a great 2024 with y'all. We hope 2025 can be even better, and we're super excited to continue this from January all the way to December again, and then hopefully can carry it into 2026. But we appreciate all you guys that are sticking with us here in 2025, and appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for listening.